Hey there, friends. My name's Matthew. I'm the C# artisan, and this is the 5th video in my series on SendGrid. In the last video, we learned how to send a single message to a single recipient. But of course, in the real world, you're going to want to do a lot more than that. You're going to want to send many messages to many recipients. So that's what we're going to look at today. Now, taking our code from last time, you might think you could write something like this, where you simply write a loop. Let's say you've got some list of recipients. So for each recipient in your list, go ahead and send a message. Well, let's think about this for a moment. Let's say you had 10,000 recipients in your list. This would mean that this loop would execute 10,000 times. And remember, each of those calls is an HTTP post to the SendGrid server. So this is a very inefficient way to send your 10,000 messages. It's going to be slow because each one of those posts is a round trip, and it's also going to just create an awful lot of traffic between you and the SendGrid server. So we are not going to implement sending multiple messages this way. So how can we do it? What's a more efficient way to do it? Now, of course, you might be aware that with a mail message, you can actually address the message to multiple recipients. Of course, you can just put multiple people on the to line. And SendGrid does support this kind of thing. Within the personalization section of the data that you send to SendGrid, you can list multiple to entries within a single personalization. So if you set it up like this with two entries, that's TWO 2 entries, you would get a message that looked like that. So that would work. And of course, a really common use for this is to do something like one recipient on the to line and somebody else on the CC. So this is quite common. And again, it's the same within SendGrid. Within a single personalization, you can specify one or more people on the to line and one or more people on the CC line. And of course, also the BCC line. But none of this is probably really what you want. This isn't why you're using SendGrid. If you're using a solution like SendGrid, it's because you want to do something like this. You want to send one message to one recipient and a completely different message to another recipient, and you want to have each message customized for that recipient. So you can see this is our appointment reminder for Fred, saying that the appointment is with Dr. D'Angelo on March 7th. And this is the appointment reminder for Sally, whose appointment is with Dr. Caruso on March 9th. And you'd like to do maybe 10,000 of these. So SendGrid absolutely supports this. And it's done also through the personalizations construct. But in this case, instead of jamming multiple people on the to line for each message, you simply include multiple personalizations. And you can see here that we have one personalization for Fred and one personalization for Sally, and you can go ahead and add hundreds and hundreds of personalizations. So that's what we are going to do in this video. We're going to take a look at first in Postman how we would send these messages, just setting up our JSON, and then we will adapt the C# code from our last video on sending a single message and allow it to be this really efficient multi-message sender. All right, let's dig into the code. Before we attempt to run anything in C#, let's just test it in Postman. So here I've got a message ready to go with a single personalization. So it's going to be from the C# artisan, the subject, appointment reminder, and in the personalizations array, there's just one personalization, which happens to have two different people on the to line. And then we've got some merge values here that are going to go into the body. So I'm going to move this to my other screen. And you can see these two mailboxes here that are ready to receive these messages. So I'm going to click send, and I got a 202 accepted, and there they are. They came right in. So you'll notice it's the same message, right? The content is exactly the same, Dr. Caruso on March 9th. And that when we look at this one, so this is Sally's mailbox, and you can see the message was to Fred and me, which is Sally. And this is Fred's mailbox, and his says it was sent to him, Fred, and Sally. So there you go. One personalization, two recipients on the to line. So let's go ahead and delete these messages, clean up for our next test. So the next one is multiple personalizations. So in this example, from is the same. The subject has a merge field in it. And under personalizations, you can see I've got 1, 2 personalizations. The first personalization is for Fred with some data, and the second is for Sally with some data. Same body. So let's go ahead and we'll click send, and 202 accepted, and boom, they're already there. So now you can see that the messages have been sent separately. So Sally got a message with the appointment for Dr. Caruso on March 9th, and Fred got an appointment with Dr. D'Angelo on March 7th. And this one was only sent to Fred, and this one was only sent to Sally. So that is what we're going to now implement in C#. We're going to set it up so that we can use multiple personalizations to send multiple messages with a single HTTP post. Here we are in our SendGrid example project. And a lot of this is the same, but I did do a little refactoring. The first thing I changed is I factored out this function, which is a helper function to simply create a message. So you pass it subject, body, and optional from, and it creates the SendGrid message object for you. This just factors it out so we can reuse it. And then the next thing I did is the most relevant. That's the add recipients method, where you give it a message and a list of recipients, and it loops through them. And for each one, it adds a personalization. So one personalization per recipient. And each personalization has a single person on the to line and the set of data substitutions for our merge fields. So when we send messages, we give it subject, body, and a list of recipients. It creates the client, sets up the message, adds the recipients, and sends it. To test this, I've modified our main function here. So it creates a recipients list, and it's adding 2 recipients, Sally and Fred, and then it sends it. Let's go ahead and run this and watch it go. Okay, so we build our recipients list and add Sally, add Fred, and we can step into this now. We'll create our client. We're going to create the message, and when we add the recipients, you'll see it's looping. There's Fred, and there's Sally. I might have got them in the wrong order, but those are our 2 recipients. And then we go ahead and we send it, and our response code should be accepted. Very good. And we can kill this off. And now let's go look at our mailboxes. So you can see Sally got a message. Hello, Sally, your score on the exam was 98. Hello, Fred, your score on the exam was 12. I'm sorry, Fred, that didn't go very well. So that is the basic code. Now, there is only one nuance. It's a very important nuance that we need to take care of, and that's this. In SendGrid, a message has a limit of 1,000 personalizations. So if this recipients list happens to contain more than 1,000 people, which it very well might, this code isn't actually going to work because it's going to create too many personalizations. So what do? So we can just do a very nice little chunking solution here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get an IEnumerable of SendGrid recipient data. Those are my chunks using the list.chunk method here, this extension method. So what this will do is it will break the big list up into smaller lists. So let's say you had 3,400 recipients. You'd end up with 4 chunks. The first 3 chunks would each have 1,000 recipient datas in the array, and then the remainder of 400 ends up in the 4th chunk. And then we loop our chunks. So let me put that code in. So for each chunk in our list of chunks, then we create the recipients from that chunk. So what this will do, if it was, again, 3,400, we would create a message, add 1,000 personalizations to it, and then loop. We'd create a second message, add 1,000 personalizations, a third of 1,000, and then a fourth of 400. So it will actually take 4 HTTP post messages to the SendGrid server to send our 3,400. But it's still much better than the silly example I gave you at the beginning of trying to send them all individually. So there you've got it, sending multiple messages to SendGrid in the most efficient, proper way possible. Hey there, C# friends. Are you enjoying these videos and finding them helpful? I hope so. And if you are, please go ahead and like the video on YouTube. If you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel and feel free to leave a comment. I would love to hear from you.